mangled limbs strewn all over. Severed parts being gathered by colleagues from the blast site. These images have plunged the nation into despair. The death toll making it deadlier than the Uri strike of 2016.
The Pulwama Attack is the deadliest attack on security forces by terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir. It is even considered deadlier than the attack on Uri and Pathankot that we have seen previously. Let us listen to the statement of Governor Satyapal Malik to the NDTV on the issue.
Surveillance failure was not there because inputs were there.
Yes.
But yes, some लापरवाही was there because इतना बड़ा गाड़ी में आप भर के चले आए और आपको कहीं चेक नहीं हुए हो, तो वो हमारी नाकामयाबी जरूर है.
So, Mr. Chakma, is this a case of intelligence negligence or intelligence failure?
It's very difficult to say at this stage whether it's a case of intelligence failure or intelligence negligence. I think what's clear at this stage is the fact that the Jaish-e-Mohammed had prior information about the movement of the security forces in Jammu and Kashmir, that they had specific information that about 278 trucks as well as 2,500 CRPF personnel would be moving. So they organized themselves and asked this Fidayan to commit the terror attack by killing himself. Now the question will arise, how did Jaish-e-Mohammed had access to the specific information? Because it's very clear that the guy was waiting only to hit at the security forces. If you look at the car bomb attacks in Afghanistan, Pakistan or elsewhere, you will see that car bomb attacks usually take place on static objects which have already been identified, whether it's a hospital or something else. But in this case, the attacks took place on a moving convoy, and on a moving convoy, it's very difficult to attack or carry out such kind of attacks unless you had prior information or they already knew that this is the particular pattern of movement by the security forces. But in this particular case, it's a particular pattern of movement by the security forces, because the movement of about 2,500 CRPF personnel as well as 278 vehicles is not your usual pattern of movement. So if we look at the recent reports in Jammu and Kashmir, you could see that there were precedents or incidents where the security forces of Jammu and Kashmir were found hand in glove with the terrorist groups. Whether this particular information with respect to the movement of the CRPF actually had fallen into the hands of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, who could carry out the attack, is actually something to be looked at. And unless that particular issue is looked at, you are not going to find a solution by saying there was a case of intelligence failure or intelligence negligence, because the issue, if the Jaish-e-Mohammed had prior information, is no longer the case of intelligence failure or intelligence negligence. Is actually a case of intelligence leakage, and where this leakage had taken place or at all took place is something to be looked at by the government of India.
So how do we prevent such terror attacks in the future?
There is no magic way to stop this kind of terror attacks, especially if the person is willing to kill himself. If he is willing to blow up, how do you stop it? But if you look at the patterns of the security forces as well as the intelligence agencies on the ground, you usually see that there is a high alertness prior to Republic Day or Independence Day or on the day on which Afzal Guru was executed, and you expect certain kind of attacks. But if you look at the attacks which took place in Uri as well as at Pathankot, you will see that the attacks take place at sensitive point of time for India. Now the question is, how do you define that sensitive time? It's very difficult to define that sensitive time. But having said that, at this point of time, of course, given the fact that India is going to face elections, obviously it's a sensitive time in itself. So you could see that terrorist groups have been trying to set the agenda with respect to the events in India. If that's the case, then you have to assess in what circumstances actually the situation becomes sensitive to expect certain kind of attacks. There is no clearly defined yardstick on this issue, and this is not something which can be done by the intelligence agencies at the local level. It's something to be assessed at the very senior level and issue instruction accordingly. And until and unless we are able to actually assess this particular situation over a period of time, you would see that this kind of attacks are being repeated. Then we become complacent that no such major attack had taken place. Then you wait for the another attacks. Then we had forgotten what are the elements to make a particular situation sensitive. So that's why I think the definition or the way you define or assess a particular situation to be sensitive to expect attacks by the terrorists is very critical assessment that the government of India can no longer ignore.
So what should be the long-term response to address the security concerns or Jammu and Kashmir as a problem?
It's not easy to find a solution to a crisis like the one we have in Jammu and Kashmir. It has its own historical roots in the partition of India, like all the problems where you have armed conflicts in South Asia. But having said that, I think the closest situation which the government of India could look at is the situation in Nagaland. Of course, Nagaland is different because you are having ceasefire agreement with all the groups. Then security is taken care of by itself, and of course the issue left to be decided or to be considered is only the issue of governance. But I think still the situation in Nagaland could be relevant because the government of India has to consider two critical elements for long-term solution. One is to ensure the security, and that's where I think the government of India really needs to relook based on the experiences or the incidents which have taken place in the last 4 and 5 years, where the patterns of the conflict have changed from what you had earlier in Jammu and Kashmir. Because earlier in Jammu and Kashmir you had full-blown insurgency. You no longer have a full-blown insurgency, but one lone attack by a Fedayeen could be more devastating, and that's a situation which the Jammu and Kashmir is facing, and the government of India has to look at it. And it is in that context I had stated that there is a need to actually identify the situations, the timing, at what point of time it could be very sensitive to expect certain kind of attacks from the terrorist group. The second issue is of course the governance issue. I think the fact that the governance has been left to the people of Nagaland is something to be considered in the context of Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore the closest situation which we have, or which the government of India could look at, is Nagaland, even though the Naga issue is not the kind of issue which we have Jammu and Kashmir because of the involvement of Pakistan, but still in the context of governance as well as the ensuring security in the states, I think the issue of the situation in Nagaland is something which could be looked at.
Thanks for watching the Rights View channel. Please subscribe.